Welcome to the Mouse Bytes podcast. Here we go. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Mouse Bytes podcast, the show all about Disney, video games past and present. I am your host, Jeph, and I am joined by my co-host, Clay. Hey, Clay.
Hello.
It has been a long while since we last recorded.
Yes.
I think since October.
Oops.
And our apologies if anyone out there was anxiously waiting on bated breath for Epic Mickey 2. We, as you probably saw by the title, are not covering that today. We kind of took a little time out to regroup and get our act selves together over the holidays and all that good stuff. So it's good to be back, good to be recording again.
Yeah.
I know you've got a few other podcasts you do, but for me, this is the first I've recorded since our last episode.
Yeah, we're back and we're ready for bigger and better things. So I think moving forward, you should expect a lot from us because we're rested up after the holidays, so we have a lot going on, and more of that will be revealed in time. So I think it's going to be good moving forward.
Yeah, agreed. I think we've got some really exciting plans, and hopefully we'll be able to let you all know more about that. Hopefully next episode, if not the one after that.
Yeah.
But in the meantime, today's game is going to be Lilo and Stitch for the Game Boy Advance. Alright, so first off, what the heck is this game?
Yes, what the heck indeed. Let's see. I think basically the way I saw it classified on the internet was an action platformer. But I think you could go even a little more deep with it. It's definitely, the thing is, this game is has different kind of gameplay mechanics to it, and I'm not going to go into the details just yet. But so it varies from level to level. But I think at its core, it's really is like a shooter, platforming, like shoot 'em up. But then it also has these other levels of varying, mechanics and things. But when I think of this game, I think of running around shooting people with Stitch.
Yeah, same.
Is there any games? Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, I've seen it compared to Contra and Metal Slug.
Yes.
And then I've never played Mega Man, but just the look of it kind of reminded me of Mega Man.
Yeah,
so,
I'd say it's pretty accurate.
Stuff like that. Yeah. At least in the Stitch levels, and then we'll talk a little bit more about some of the varying gameplay types, but yeah, I would agree with you that the core is kind of an action platformer shooter type thing.
Yeah, so I think they nailed that, but I'll talk about that in a second. So
yeah. So from there, do you have any prior history with this game, or was this kind of your first time out with it?
So for me, how I kind of came to know this game, I did not play this back in the early 2000s. Somehow this one just completely was not ever on my radar. And so it wasn't until, I think it was just this year, that I finally got a copy of this. A little background. I watched this movie in the theaters, Lilo and Stitch. I remember when it first came out, I went and saw it with my family, and I really enjoyed it, thought it was a good movie, but didn't really follow up with it much after that, and watch the sequels or anything, and probably still won't, but so I always thought
no one would blame you.
Yeah, right. And so I don't know, I just always thought it was a good movie, but didn't really ever watch it a whole lot. And anyway, fast forward, I got married to my wife, who loves this movie, and I just always thought it was because she kind of looks like Lilo a little bit. She's not Hawaiian, but she's Filipino, so you can see it. Anyway, so not that long ago, like a year or two ago, we sat down and watched it again. I think it was on Netflix or something, and I was just laughing my butt off, and I was like, man, this movie is way funnier than I remember. Like, Lilo is just, she was just cracking me up. Like, she's like this little girl, but she has like this outlook on life that's very like, I don't know, grown up. And I don't know, I really enjoyed it a whole lot more watching it through more recently. And so since then, I've become a huge Lilo and Stitch fan. And when we went to Disney this past year, me and my wife bought all kinds of Lilo and Stitch stuff. And nice. So I'm definitely a huge fan now. And yeah, so I was randomly in a video game store this year and noticed a Game Boy Advance game that said Lilo and Stitch on it. I think it was $3, and I was like, yep, getting that. Nice. I don't know anything about this game, but I've got to have it. And so I wasn't expecting much when I put it in, but I was pleasantly surprised. And really, I guess the only thing I'll say about it is just what I was hoping it was is pretty much what it is. I was like, well, they could totally ruin this movie as far as a game goes, but if it has Stitch and he's running around shooting things, I'll be super happy with this. And yeah, so I think it totally delivered just off my having no idea what it was and just kind of having, you know, expectations of what it could be. So I was totally ready to be disappointed and wasn't. So that's a very long version of kind of my history with it.
Okay. Wow. Yeah. For me, it's a little less involved than that. Basically, as far as my history with the movie goes, I really... So when the movie came out, it was what, like 2002. I was, let's see, I would have been 17, 16, somewhere in there. It didn't appeal to me. I was still into Disney movies. I've always appreciated them, but it just didn't really appeal to me based on the trailers. I tried watching it a few years later, I think with a girl I was dating or something, and I really didn't like it just based on the opening half hour or so, maybe 20 minutes. I couldn't get over the fact that Lilo was trying to get her sister arrested or whatever, you know, like locking her out of the house when the social worker was coming or whatever that was, whatever that scene is at the beginning.
Yeah.
It just infuriated me to the point where I was just like, I can't watch this. I did eventually watch it a couple years ago now with my wife, and I appreciate the movie as a whole. I still don't like the beginning, and it made it hard to like the character of Lilo at the beginning, but ultimately, you know, I get it, and it is a very deep movie as far as like complex family relationships and weird stuff like that you wouldn't really expect from a Disney movie, in my opinion. But anyway,
dude,
long story short, I have no
argued.
history.
We argued about that one time. I remember you're like, I don't like that. She's mean to her sister, and I'm like, she's a little girl, dude. She's emotional. Her parents are gone. She's acting out. It all, yeah, it makes you mad, but it's real. Like, that kind of stuff probably happens.
See, and I think the reason I had a hard time relating to it is because, like, I didn't lose my parents, but like my parents split when I was 3, and I had a very close bond with my sisters. I had an older sister in particular that I was really close to, and it's like I would have done anything to make sure that I didn't get her arrested. So I had a really hard time accepting the reality that maybe other kids have different issues working through.
Yeah.
Tough, complex issues like this. So it's like I've come around on it a lot. But yeah.
All
so
right. Well,
I had never played the game before until this, obviously. So
yes.
That's it.
Well, we're polar opposites as far as the movie goes, but hopefully hopefully we can figure it out as far as the game goes.
Yeah. So a little bit of info about the game. It was developed by Digital Eclipse for the Game Boy Advance back in 2002. They were a pretty well-known port developer at the time, I think. Like, they did, I want to say they might have even done like the Tony Hawk game, but I might be thinking of someone else. But they were a prominent Game Boy Advance developer that did some pretty good ports. It looks like they did Rayman and Spyro, GTA for the GBA. Love saying that.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, so, I mean, and they eventually merged with another company more recently. But anyway, yeah, I remember being a fan of their work at the time. I know the developer, at least.
Yeah. Wow, they did a lot of ports, it looks like.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they were. I feel like that's what they were kind of known for at the time.
Right. Lots of Xbox Live Arcade and things like that. Okay. Interesting.
Yep. Yeah. Is there any other details about what the game? Let's see.
It released in
Info.
2002. The game did, which was the same year as the movie released. Correct?
Yep, I think so.
So I don't know what the months were on. Looks like the
June
is when the movie came out. I want to say
Okay, yeah,
that's
the game on the Disney Wiki page says June 7th. So
okay.
2002.
So
it looked like it was a co-launch.
Yeah, and usually when that happens, in my experience, the game ends up being terrible because they're
usually
rushing to get it out. But this doesn't feel like a rush job, so that's cool.
Yeah.
And
I was pleasantly surprised.
Yeah, and a nice thing, not trying to get too far into the story here, is it's not just a play-by-play of the movie, and so even if you did get this early, it doesn't really spoil a whole lot of the movie, which is nice. Yeah. You know, it's a completely separate storyline, and so that's interesting. It's also worth mentioning this only came out on the Game Boy Advance, and didn't release on any other systems, so it was an exclusive for Nintendo. And there were some other Lilo and Stitch games that did release. There was a sequel. I don't know if it was directly correlated to the sequel movie or if it was just a sequel to this game, but there is another Game Boy Advance Lilo and Stitch game. I think it's just called Lilo and Stitch 2, and that game, I don't know a ton about it. I watched a little bit of gameplay, and it looks not as colorful and kind of drab and different company or developer, and I don't know. I need to check it out, but just the very little I looked at it, I wasn't overly impressed. I did think the music sounded better, but anyway. And then there was also a PlayStation 1 game that came out that was just called Lilo and Stitch. Within the States, that was what it was called. And so those games have nothing to do with this game. This game's completely separate, different developers, and all of that. So this is completely unique. You can't find this storyline in this game in another game anywhere else. So this is kind of a one of a kind, which is nice. Some of the other games that we've covered here have, released, multiple consoles. So that's worth mentioning.
Absolutely. Okay, well, with that, I think we can probably jump into our gameplay discussion. Alright, so as we discuss the gameplay, we'll be covering the visuals, the audio, gameplay, and the difficulty, and just touch on the story and the levels kind of in different sections. So we'll start off with visuals. So Clay, what did you think of the visuals of this game?
I think this game looks freaking awesome, man. It is
Agreed.
Super colorful and just way vibrant, and the animations are great, as most Disney games are. And I just think that it's so easy to play on. Even if you're playing it on a TV, I mean, it maybe doesn't look as good, but fun little story. I just recently bought my first Game Boy Advance SP. I never owned one as a kid and had been holding off waiting for the one, as they say, and was at a game store a couple weeks ago and found this beautiful dark gray Game Boy Advance SP that was like basically brand new, and it was like $30-some, and so I snagged it. And
real quick, do you happen to know, is it the backlit or the side lit model?
It is, I believe it
makes a little bit of a difference.
It definitely does. It's the one that has two different brightnesses on it, which I believe is the backlit. And
should be the backlit one.
Yeah.
I'm not 100% sure on that, but cool.
And I was stupid because I didn't even check that when I was looking at it. I totally should have. And then I got home and I was like, oh, good, it's the really nice one. So I got a steal, dude. I don't know how I did it. So anyway, this game looked really good on it. I was playing it today at work, and I was like, man, it looks really good. And so, I think it's beautiful.
Cool. Yeah, no, I totally agree. The backgrounds, which I think is maybe the only thing you didn't mention right there, or is another thing that they stand out. They're very detailed, very well colored, but they kind of have that muted color to keep the characters from blending into them, which is much appreciated, especially when playing on original hardware, especially the non-backlit GBAs.
Yeah.
doesn't hold up so well when you do put it on, an SP or even play it on a DS or I played it on emulation on a TV, which honestly it held up decently. It really didn't look terrible. I mean, it didn't look great, but definitely the art style holds up well. The animation, like you said, is extremely good, very fluid. There's some big bosses, which is really cool, that take up, like half the screen or whatever, which is great. Yeah, and there's some cool effects, I think, since we're talking visuals. There's one level that's like a shooter, but it's almost cylindrical, like you're in a tube.
Tube shooter.
That's what I would call it, yeah. But it's a cool 3D effect that, I mean, is impressive for the GBA,
totally.
in my opinion.
There's also another thing that's very visually impressive and highly demanding. Why don't you tell the listeners about that?
Yeah, so this game actually includes video clips. I'm not familiar enough with the movie to know if they're taken from that or if they were originally original.
They're from
the movie.
Yeah, they're
okay.
from the movie.
Okay, but it actually has some actual video clips, which, they're compressed, but they do not look awful. Again, especially on the small screen.
Yeah, I noticed when I put them on my TV.
Marvel.
Yeah, when I put it on my TV, I'm like, ooh, yeah.
Yeah.
But when it's on the advance or whatever, it's not bad. It's pretty impressive.
Yeah. It's a cool feat, and especially on a cartridge-based system where, cartridge space is valuable. So
yeah, I will
cool
say
that they pulled that off.
The weak part of those is the audio. That sounds like super compressed and
super compressed. Yeah. I call it the digital glint. I don't know what the term is for like super compressed audio, but it almost sounds like crystal breaking.
Right. Yeah. No, totally. Yeah. So the game has those. I think there's 4 of them, and you will unlock them throughout the game, and you can watch them. They have nothing to do with the storyline though, so they're just like cool little things that you can unlock.
Bonus. Yeah.
But this was like a big deal for this game. In fact, on the cover art of the game, it says featuring, I don't know, it said full motion video or something, or video clips from the movie. And so that was kind of their big, pull, I guess.
It's almost like including a trailer, because if it launched with the game, to have essentially home video accompanying it.
Yeah, before it's even out in the
before
theater.
It's on DVD. Yeah.
Right.
So,
and then, so along with that, there are cut scenes of sorts throughout, in between levels, and those are just still images.
Comic style.
Yeah. And so those look pretty good, I would say.
They're decent, yeah.
They're not, like, amazing, but, like, it's one of those things where you can tell it's a different art style than, say the original, the actual movie or whatever. And so, but for what they were doing, like, it also kind of felt like some of the times you'd see Stitch and he looked really good, but then like the bad guys in the cutscene looked kind of not as good, and it felt like they were just pulling, Stitch art assets and throwing that in,
and then creating some originals
over top of it. So that at times it kind of felt like there was like a bit of a divide, but I appreciate they did it, and it helped with the storyline and gave it some substance throughout. So that was worth noting.
Absolutely. All right. Is there anything else on the visuals we want to touch on, or shall we move on to the audio?
There's not much else. I know we hit on the animations and stuff. I think the sprites look really good. I think Stitch looks great. Lilo looked a little bit weird at times. Something about her face, it just looked a little off. But, I mean, she has like a sneaking animation when you're trying to sneak by bad guys. And it's very like over the top and just like super cartoony and fun. So I really like that. Yeah. And then Stitch does this little grin every time you duck, where you can see his teeth, and I don't know, that just kind of made me chuckle.
Lots of little added effects that were good.
Yeah, I think overall, just it looks really good. The bad guys kind of have a Mega Man vibe to them, where everything is kind of robotic and mechanical or whatever, but they're like purple and stuff because it's just crazy colors,
like space pirates, and
so it's really cool. yeah, oh, man, I just keep seeing all these animations that are really good. There's one level where you're running from the final boss, and Lilo is on Stitch's back, and so she's got her her hands holding on to him because she's like on his back, and she's like covering his eyes, and his mouth is just wide open, and it's just funny looking. She's looking back and like terrified, and he's basically running blind almost. And I don't know, it's just stuff like that where you just look at it and you're like, man, that's just really well done. And so I could talk about it forever, but we can move on to the audio part.
Okay, yeah, we'll move on. Basically, the animation is incredible, if nothing else, but it's a solid visual product. The audio, I only played through the first couple levels, and I will say that the music got really redundant and didn't really match the on-screen action. I don't know what your thoughts are on the music.
Yeah, I wasn't a huge fan. I wasn't completely blown away. It just felt like generic action Game Boy Advance music. There were points where they tried to kind of give it maybe a tropical or Hawaiian feel or whatever, but then a lot of the time it wasn't. But you don't really...
It's like generic tropical, but not really Hawaiian, in my opinion.
Yeah, and to be fair, you kind of go into space after like level 1, so after that you're not really... I don't know. It just didn't feel completely authentic. It just felt kind of added. So I wasn't a huge fan. I also... The sound effects were just kind of okay.
They weren't.
It didn't make
anything.
I didn't feel super cool every time I shot a gun. I can't remember exactly the sound they made, but it was just kind of meh. So the audio side I think was a little weak compared to the visual side of this one. But yeah, and I agree with you. I think it got a little repetitive at times, but luckily the gameplay was kind of pulled you in, so it didn't stand out too much. So
we can probably just jump right into gameplay now. There's not much to say about the audio. Gameplay I really enjoy, at least for the bit of it that I did play. I didn't play the entire thing, but the shooting feels really good. You can shoot diagonally and jump and shoot down. I mean, it's they give you a lot of good freedom with that, which goes a long way. You're not locked into animations. You're not locked into anything like that, which it helps for a shooter game, where you need to have some reflexes to duck stuff and all that. So, and then there's tons of other variations of gameplay, which we can kind of discuss.
Yeah, and I think that's like a good part about this game is if every level was just Stitch running around shooting, it would get really old. But I think that they did a really good job of keeping it, changing it up and then pulling back into Stitch every now and then, because after a while you're like, oh man, I want to shoot some things with him. And so I think they did a pretty good job of not making it monotonous and using both Stitch and Lilo. To be honest, when I got to her level, I was kind of surprised. Oh, you get to play as her? That's awesome. And
I wasn't expecting it.
Right. I just figured, oh, he's the action star and he'll just he'll be rescuing her or whatever. And so I think that was good. My issue with the Stitch shooting parts is I kept getting shot, and it felt like all it was is a bad guy would show up at the far right side of the screen, and he would immediately shoot at you. And so unless you had really good reflexes, you just get hit, and the bullets move pretty quick, so it wasn't the easiest thing to dodge. I don't know. It just felt a little cheap. Like I just found myself repeatedly shooting at nothing just for,
just so you'd have coverage.
Right. So as soon as they did spawn on the screen, I would immediately shoot them. And I just I don't know if that's great gameplay, but I'm not a huge shooter, guy that would know how you fix that kind of issue. But after a while, I was just like, man, I'm just getting hit a lot, and I didn't feel like they would come on screen. I don't know if they shoot off screen, but it felt like they did. Maybe they do. I can't remember.
Interesting. I didn't feel like I had that problem, so that's interesting. Occasionally a guy would come from the left side behind you, and I wouldn't see it because I'd be looking to the right. But and then the grenade guys, occasionally I would miss time and get hit by a grenade.
Yeah.
But no, overall I didn't super struggle with that. I did see in a long play that I watched after playing that you can pick up boxes and you can pick up like helicopter things that you shoot down.
Yeah.
Didn't realize that. So there's a lot of gameplay, a lot of extra gameplay elements, I think.
Right.
You know, that go a long way. You pick up weapon upgrades as you kill enemies. Some of them will drop them and get more powerful, fatter beams. And so
yeah, fatter beams.
That helps. Very Contra-esque.
Yeah.
And yeah, then okay, for me, for the Lilo sections, I didn't love those. I didn't actually know about the sneak or the hide thing.
Right.
So I kept dying, and those don't have checkpoints. So like the Stitch levels, you can kind of get halfway and it'll restart you halfway if you die or whatever. But if you die in a Lilo level, you start from the very beginning, and they're kind of puzzles,
right.
mazes. It would be the best way to describe it, with some switches and elevators and stuff, and using characters to clear paths. And they're fun. I didn't dislike the idea of it. I think I just struggled a little bit with understanding some of the mechanics of it. But yeah, it's a cool variation. Like you said, and like I said, it was fun to suddenly be playing as Lilo when I wasn't expecting it. So
totally. No, I think those are all completely valid points. Something I didn't think about, because I was playing a Lilo level today. I think it was the second one of hers, and this one guy kept getting me in his bubble gun thing, and I kept having to go back and try to rescue, let more people out of their cells, and then it's just like it was monotonous. I have to keep doing those things to get back to that point so I could figure out what I was doing wrong. And so no, I totally agree. Like, even if you have to start at the beginning, don't make me do these little like, oh, I'll open your cell again. And so that
get back to the point.
Right. And sometimes it just wasn't clear what they wanted you to do, whether, because she has her own attack where you use Scrum, which is her little toy dolly or whatever, and you hit people with it, and then sometimes you just need to sneak by them. So I don't know if they were just trying to give you some freedom, or if that was like intentional, like, or just they just did a bad job telling you what you're supposed to do. So
I wonder if the instruction booklet maybe had a little more detail about that.
Probably. I'm
wondering, because I had no idea, and the game doesn't tell you. There's no prompt or on-screen tutorial or whatever.
Right. Yeah. So I'd say it's a good change up, but overall probably not the most well designed. But for a change of pace, I welcome it still. So
yeah, totally
cool. Let's see. What do you think about the difficulty in general? Just the game. I know I kind of struggled with it at times.
Tough side, yeah. Like the first boss was really hard for me. It's like this big claw creature that shoots like this chain at you, or like a grappling hook, and then it's electrified. And so you have to kind of dodge that and shoot him. But then if you get too close, he'll jump, and he has a very wide spread and can come down on you and hurt you that way. But then even if you avoid that, he shoots out like a screen wide. I don't know if it's like an electric field or whatever, this blue lightning type thing. And you have to time a jump to avoid that. And it's a pretty complicated boss for a first boss. I didn't play any of the other bosses, but from what I've seen, they look like they're kind of steps up from that.
Well, yeah, and I think the thing that we were not doing is, I guess, some people say this game is broken because the grenades are so powerful that if you just save them to the end of a level, you can just wipe out a boss in like 3 or 4 really quick hits. Whereas the whole time I'm like not even thinking about the fact that I have grenades, and I'm just shooting them and trying to like find a place to stand. I was
using them.
Okay. Supposed to make it easier.
I didn't save them all. I was kind of using them as I got them.
Right.
I used a few on that boss, but it was still tough. So yeah, and like you were saying, some of the challenge in the shooting levels with Stitch, like you said, like sometimes they just shoot before they get there, or you can't dodge fast enough.
Right.
And sometimes like there's 2 grenade guys, and they'll just kind of tag team you, and you can't avoid them. So
yeah,
there's some challenge, but I don't know. I was still one of those where I was able to keep at it and get through it. The parts that I played. Yeah. So it didn't feel broken. It felt kind of just challenging.
Yeah, and
maybe a little more than you would expect for a so-called kids game.
Totally. Yeah, I would definitely say it's
Disney movie.
It's pretty challenging for probably their target demographic. But there are like extra lives strewn about and health and things, so it's not completely, you know, blockbuster savage or whatever we call it. But it's up there, and yeah, I definitely game overed a bit and was having to retry. And then I also figured out there's a way to start with 99 lives. If you like hold down the right button, select, and then you hit A for new game, it gives you 99 lives. Which I wish I'd realized when I was first trying to play through it. Would have made a little more for a relaxing run. But so yeah, it's cool. This game has passwords and cheats too, which I thought was kind of cool.
It's an interesting thing to note that it doesn't have a save feature. That's why it requires the passwords.
Right. Yeah.
Which for 2002, it's kind of surprising.
They're too busy trying to figure out how to put their movie into the game.
Yeah.
Apparently.
Or they were just too cheap to include a battery.
Yeah, it's probably that one.
That's probably that. But, you know.
Yeah. So, let's see. I'm trying to think. All right. So, basically, I think we should just kind of briefly explain, you know, the plot of this game. It's not a very deep plot. And then we can just kind of hit these levels and kind of talk about the mechanics as we go down them.
The additional mechanics.
Right.
Yeah, let's do that.
I'm probably not saying all this properly, but as far as you can really tell, basically the story starts out, Lilo and Stitch are hanging out on the beach making this creepy looking sandcastle monster guy, and these like otters and other creatures show up and from space and kidnap Lilo right in front of Stitch, and so it's up to Stitch to save her, and so that's kind of where it just dumps you out and you go from there. And so you start off at the beach in Hawaii, and it's kind of an alien invasion, and you're just trying to work your way through. And so I'm trying to think if there's anything I'm missing. Yeah, and that's kind of basically it. Not a very complex story, but something to kind of it doesn't really state where it sits in the timeline. I'm sure it's probably after the movie, but it could kind of honestly fit anywhere because it just starts, oh, we're hanging out on the beach. But as we mentioned, once you get to level 2, which is Mothership, you take control of Lilo, which is sweet because they could have just made it, like I said earlier, just all about Stitch. But I love that we cut to Lilo and she's running around the ship just like causing havoc and like breaking out. And eventually in the second level, you meet this other alien who's been held captive, and you find out that, you know, he's a good guy, and so you kind of are helping him. I assume he's helping you. I can't really remember. So then after that, after you beat that level, you move on to the space cruiser. So basically, Stitch has a ship, and he's trying to get to Lilo, and so that's when you get to the tube shooter level. Which is, once again, nice change of pace, something different. This one wasn't too hard. I think as the difficulty ramps up on the second one. But it's a lot of, you know, oh, there's asteroids, dodge them, shoot the bad guys. Then they kind of get more creative with their attack designs, and you're kind of going in and out and stuff. But a fun level, not overly challenging, probably one of the easier parts, I think.
Okay.
I don't know. What do you think?
I didn't actually play it. I just kind of watched that one. But yeah, it definitely looks like that, exactly how you described it. Like it's a little bit less stressful, kind of just very straightforward, I guess.
Yeah, and probably
it's just you can see what's coming, avoid it, or shoot it.
Yeah, and it was probably easy for them to design it too. It was probably like a really easy, like, oh, let's throw this in. And
yeah,
I don't want to diminish what they're doing, but I'm sure it probably was a lot less taxing. So after that is a level called Scum, which you play as Stitch once again. You land on this planet, and then you get this like weird walker
insect
thing that you drive.
Like a bug.
Yeah. It's kind of strange. It definitely gives off a Metal Slug vibe, because you get a lot of vehicles in those and in those games, and has a gun on it, basically like a turret gun, and you just can aim all around, and you can run over bad guys with it and stuff.
Yeah, it's pretty powerful,
which is pretty cool. I didn't die once on this level. I just I noticed my health kept going down, but I never actually like lost a life. And so, which was fine. Like, it was a fun level. There was a little bit of platforming toward the end, which was a little bit difficult with the thing you're driving around. And so it was interesting, but it was a cool level. And then at the very end of that level, you jump off of it or jump down into this hole, and then basically the entire boss is just a long free fall, and you're fighting this like green goo thing, which is the boss. And it's cool. It's like a cool concept that you're having this like Gandalf in air battle. With this giant
Ridley from Metroid.
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of like they probably ripped it off from that, and so
probably.
And so you're just falling through the air, throwing pineapple grenades, and eventually you kill him, and and then you move on to the next level. Jeph, why don't you tell them what the next level is?
Let me pull that up here.
Sure.
It's called Escape. It's a Lilo level. I think that's the one you were mentioning earlier because it's the second one.
Correct.
And looking at it here, because I didn't play it, it looks like it's pretty similar to the first one.
Yeah, you're just going around. There's these little elevators that you can go up and down, and then basically there's these giant, weird-looking button things that you press, and they open up these cell doors to these giant alien prisoners. And it's kind of sick and demented if you think about it, because she's basically letting these murderous prisoners out, and then and then those criminals go and murder the guards for you so that you can get through.
Awesome.
Yeah, so that's fun. Good job, Lilo. And there is a cool mechanic in this level where you pull this lever and it makes the gravity or anti-gravity, whatever you want to call it, change, and so you basically start walking up on the ceiling, and so it's cool. I got to a part in this level where I got stuck, like I said, with that bubble gun. Couldn't figure out how to get by the guy. I think I was just supposed to sneak, and I wasn't realizing it, and so so that kind of made it not as great, but so that's pretty much that level.
Yep, and that goes right into another one of those tube shooters, basically the same thing.
Yes, just a little more elaborate, I think, but yeah.
And then from there into another, not Lilo, into another Stitch level.
Yes, this is kind of the final solo Stitch level, running and gunning, and you're shooting off all these mosquito aliens and otter.
Is it on like a space train?
Yes, yeah, you got a little train situation going.
It's cool.
Yeah, it's a nice little touch. So then following that, you hit these last 3 levels are called final challenge levels for some reason. And so after you beat that, you're still on the train, and this is the level I was talking about earlier where you guys are running from the final boss. These guys are, and so you're kind of piggybacking off each other. But an interesting mechanic is that you hit water, these like water tanks, and so at that point you have to flip around, and instead of Stitch running, Lilo runs through the water, and Stitch rides on her back, and so you kind of go back and forth. But Stitch is a much faster runner, and so you want to stay with him, the majority of the time, but you got to switch when you get to the water parts. And so,
interesting.
Yeah, it's a fun little mechanic. I thought it was kind of cool.
It looks cool, yeah.
Yeah, it's just a visually cool level, having the final boss kind of chasing you, and like I said earlier, the animations of them running is pretty great. Then you hit Final Challenge 3, which uses this vehicle. I don't know how to explain what this thing is. Jeph, why don't you take a stab?
It's like a one-wheeled gyro motorcycle thing with Lilo driving on the inside of it and Stitch in like a mounted turret on the outside of it. It reminds me of an episode of South Park. Mr. Garrison makes an invention to get around quicker.
Oh, yeah?
It kind of looks like that. I know that we're a family-friendly podcast, so I'm not going to go into detail about that. If you want to look that up, it's called The Entity.
Oh.
But, it's like a motorized unicycle type thing. I feel like there's movies where there's cops that drive these things, but I couldn't tell what that is.
It kind of reminds me, did you ever play Kirby Superstar?
I've never played a Kirby game.
All right. Well, hold on to that conversation till later because I'm not very happy with you right now. But
I know. I want to play.
Okay. Well, there's an ability you can get. There's like a partner, and he's a little motorcycle dude, and he has one wheel, and you ride on top of him, and it kind of reminds me of this, but this is kind of bigger. But anyway, it's kind of a cool thing because you can ride down on the train, but then you can also, for some reason, ride on the ceiling, and and so one of the guys I was watching said that basically if you just stay on the ceiling the entire time, you can pretty much get through this level really easily.
Yeah, because the ceiling is completely flat with no obstacles, whereas the bottom you have to like jump and stuff.
Right. So they didn't really think that through. I feel like the level's kind of broken with that. So they probably should have thought of a way to force you to come down or put holes or obstructions up top. I don't know, something, but it just makes it look like a breeze otherwise. And then, we get to the final boss, a Dr. Prestus, I think is how you say it. And Jeph, what's the final battle look like? How's that all go down?
If it's what I'm watching here, it basically you're still in that same little unicycle thing, and you've just got this thing chasing you and shooting bombs at you, and you what was that?
I was coughing.
Oh.
It's okay.
So basically you're in the unicycle thing, the boss kind of goes back and forth and throws bombs at you, and you kind of go from floor to ceiling like we were talking about in the last level, and shoot at him and dodge him. So it's kind of like an extension of that last level, really.
Right. Yeah, it's not the most elaborate thing by any means. It's pretty straightforward. But
the boss has this very Mega Man mech
totally
to him, even though he's like a big mosquito. He's like a mechanical mosquito. Cool animation. I really like when he shoots out the bombs. He looks really cool.
Yeah, he like puffs his chest out. Yeah. Like I was saying earlier, I think like all the bad guys give off a total Mega Man vibe, which is interesting. So they're all like animals, but they're like mech animals. I don't know. It's pretty neat. A cool villain, I would say. I don't really know his backstory or what his deal is, why he needed Lilo, but it's interesting he's a mosquito, because I don't know if you remember from the movies, they have a whole thing with mosquitoes in that. Do you remember that?
I do not.
Basically, these aliens lied about mosquitoes, saying that I think they lied, or maybe it was real. I think it was where they basically made up this lie that mosquitoes were like an endangered species to the galaxy, and so for that reason, Earth was of value or something, and so. So I don't know if they're like trying to play off that a little bit, or
they must have been, right? Yeah, I didn't think about
why
that.
else would you pick a mosquito? Because it's not just the final boss. A lot of the bad guys that fly around are mosquitoes. So
maybe it ties into the movie, and this is why they think the mosquitoes are so important, even though they're not. But maybe they know this race and they think that they're like that. I don't know.
There could be a really, really deep meaning to all this, but
there really could be, or there could not be.
Which is probably the case. And then
maybe this was a real mosquito that was taken into a laboratory and experimented on and became a mecha mosquito.
Right. Yeah.
Who knows?
And then so after you beat him, the game just kind of drops off. It's like, oh, thank you for saving the galaxy. Here's a ship, and then they fly away. And then it's over. The credits roll, and the game is over. And so a little disappointing, kind of on the tail end there. But like I said, the storyline was never fully fleshed out. But hey, it's a GBA game. No one needs that. We just want to shoot things at Stitch. That's all I wanted going in. So, and I was left satisfied.
Yeah.
So
it's a fun game.
Those are all the levels.
I kind of want to finish it. Like I said, I only played the first part, but very enjoyable. I'm surprised. I was really surprised overall. We can kind of move into our final thoughts here, I think.
Yeah.
So yeah, like I was definitely surprised by the graphics. I was also definitely surprised by the gameplay. I thought very well done overall. The audio was a little, left me wanting more, but if that's kind of my only gripe, that's not the worst thing. Like, gameplay and graphics are good. That can get me through.
Totally.
story is whatever. I wasn't paying close attention to it, but I'm glad that it's there. I'm glad that it wasn't the movie. I think that's kind of cool that it's supplemental in a way.
Yeah.
What are your final thoughts on this?
Yeah. So, I'm happy with it. I think it's cool. It's, like I said, it was everything I was expecting. I was not let down. I like the variety, even if it doesn't always like feel completely, solid all the way through.
Mm-hmm.
The variety was great. I think if you are a fan of this movie or the show or the sequels in any way, I highly suggest you check it out. May not be necessarily great for little kids. Maybe if you put Infinite Lives on or 99 Lives, maybe that would help a little bit. But no, I think it's a great game. I think it's colorful, visually really pleasing. The animations, like we said earlier, are just really good. And it totally satisfied what I was looking for. And I basically said, I want to play as Stitch and blow things up. And I got to do that. And so I was super happy. I think it was pretty faithful to the movie, even though it was kind of, its own little storyline. And so I don't feel like they took any liberties that I'd be like, ooh, that's not Lilo and Stitch, or that feels really out of place. So, if you're a fan of the movie at all, I highly suggest checking it out. Like I mentioned, it's super cheap, not very expensive, so you should definitely give it up. So 2 thumbs up for me, for sure.
Awesome. Alrighty, well, with that, I think we can wrap it up. So just want to thank all of you for tuning in and returning back to the show. It's good to be back. As always, you can find us on Twitter at mouse_bytes, and that's bytes with a Y, like the computer byte. From there, you can find links to all of our episodes, and catch us next week next time, hopefully in a couple weeks, as we take on Pinocchio for the Super Nintendo.
Dude, I need to stop picking platformers. I'm just thinking back, and I'm like, we've done probably all platformers at this point.
A lot of Disney games are platformers, though. Yeah. I mean, I know there's others, but
so maybe
don't worry, we'll get a better.
Okay. Yeah. So you hold me to that. After Pinocchio, we need to do like a racing game or a sports game or something. We need some variety, a little spice. But I'm excited for Pinocchio, so I can't wait for us to talk about it.
Same.
Awesome.
Alrighty. Well, thank you, everybody. Thank you, Clay.
Yeah, thank you.
And we will catch you all next time.
See ya.
Bye.
Thank you so much for watching. Be sure to subscribe, check out some of our other videos, and visit thenintendovillage.com, your home for everything Nintendo.